So what is equity valuation all about? Especially in the context of an introductory to finance course, okay? The idea here is that you want to be able to understand how we use the constant growth dividend discount model. It's really what it's all about, especially in an introduction to finance course. So we're going to be able to kind of make sense of what are the different components of our constant DDM model, and also how do we plot this onto a timeline and make sense of this in real time. So let's go give it a shot. So within this question, we're saying, what is the annual capital gain of a company that is selling for $180 and that just paid $5 in dividends and has a required rate of return of 9%? So, first thing first, we want to be able to define what our formula is all about. So let's do that right now, actually. Our formula when it comes to the constant DDM model, constant growth DDM model, will look a little bit like this. Our formula is going to look a little bit like this, in which we have P0 equals D0 times 1 plus G over K minus G. This can also be represented as following, essentially. You could also write it as this. D1 K over K minus G. It's all the same thing. And the first thing that I want you guys to be able to understand is this idea of G, okay? G essentially is our growth rate. G represents our growth of our dividend and of essentially the stock over time. It's our capital gain. So what I want you guys to be able to understand right here is that G represents our capital gain. So in a question, when they ask you what your capital gain is all about, just remember that it's G. And as you go through different finance courses and you get a better understanding of what finance, in a sense, in the schooling system is all about, you're going to be also able to understand that capital gain essentially represents our growth rate. And our growth rate can be essentially broken down as follows. As the following little function. Our growth rate essentially is P1 minus P0 over P0. So for example, let's say you bought a stock at $115, at $100 today, it grew to $115 next year. Essentially what you would do is you would do 115 minus 100 over 100, and it would give you your capital gain, your growth rate, which would be in this case 15%. It's very intuitive, very straightforward. That's what I just want you to be able to understand, is that your capital gain means kind of a lot of things, and it's really practical to understand how to use it in an exam question, and also just to get a better feeling for what this is, right? So, with that being said, the reason for which we placed D1, okay, as D1 is because obviously your first dividend times 1 plus your growth rate would give you your next dividend for the next period, right? It's the same idea. So, that's just a little bits and pieces of what you may want to understand. So, with that being said, let us identify the different components of our constant growth DDM, especially in the context of this question. So, as you can see here, we have what is the annual capital gain of a company that is selling for 180? So we know that 180 represents, okay, our current price. Okay, so we know that 180 will be our price 0. And we know that they just paid a dividend of $5. And in an exam question, and also just in theory, you want to know that when we say they just paid or they paid today, essentially what they're trying to say is that your dividend at time 0, your dividend at T0 is going to be equal to that. So in this case, if we tell you just paid a $5 dividend, that means that dividend at period 0 is equal to $5. So is equal to 5, okay? And then we're also telling you that your required rate of return, okay, your K, in this case, if we use a different color, that is what we call our required rate of return, okay? So your K is your required rate of return. With that being said, we would then make our K equal to 9%. And just like that, we realize that we have a lot of different, functions or parameters of our formula that's already available to us. And all that is left to do is find the missing segment. And that requires a little bit of algebra and mathematics, but it becomes really straightforward, especially if let's say you have a calculator or you just practice a little bit. So in this sense, let's try to put these things within our formula. So that would mean that 180, okay, is equal to 5 times 1 plus our growth rate, which is missing. We don't know our growth rate, right? Over K, which is essentially 9%, minus G. All right? So now it becomes a really simple game in which we're going to do as follows. So 180 times 0.09 minus G is equal to 5 times 1 plus G. And we could simplify this as follows. So we could have 16.2 minus 180 times G is equal to 5 plus 5G. And then it becomes really simple because all you have to do is solve for G. And in this case, your G, as you would see on your calculator, would give you something along the lines of 0.06, such that your answer here would be approximately 6%. So your answer, as simple as that, is equal to G equals 6%. So our capital gain is equal to 6%. So it's literally as simple as that. That's how you make sense of these questions, okay? Literally as easy as that. So just like this, you were able to figure out how to do an introductory to finance, essentially an introductory to equity valuation, a very simple question. You were able to break it down. You were able to break down, well, what is P0? What is our D0? What is our growth rate? And then how do we make this work in an exam-like question? Hopefully this was helpful.